Beneath our feet lies a hidden library of human history, written in bone and stone. This video explores 25 mysterious burial sites that reveal a lost chapter of humanity. By the end, you will see the entire timeline of human civilization in a completely new light. We will investigate why a Chinese emperor was guarded by an army of clay soldiers and what compelled Scandinavian hunter-gatherers to mount skulls on stakes. These silent graves hold answers to questions we have only just begun to ask. What part of our own world might someday be found buried and forgotten? The golden headdress of Queen Puobi still gleams after 4,500 years, a silent testament to a world where death was not an end but a grand departure. In the 1920s, archaeologist Leonard Woolley unearthed the royal cemetery of pulling back the curtain on the Sumerian civilization. What he found was beyond mere treasure. It was a complete snapshot of a society's soul. Inside the queen's tomb, treasures of gold, silver, and deep blue lapis lazuli spoke of immense wealth, but it was the presence of her entire household that truly stunned the modern world. 74 attendants, from soldiers to handmaidens, were found in a mass grave known as the Great Death Pit, having taken a poisonous concoction to follow their rulers into the next life. This was not an act of coercion, as far as evidence suggests, but a voluntary and ceremonial passage. It reveals a belief system where a king or queen's power did not cease with their final breath, but extended into the afterlife, requiring their court to continue their service for eternity. The famous Standard of a mosaic panel found in the graves, illustrates this duality of their world, depicting scenes of royal banquets and military victories, a chronicle of both peace and war. But it is the intimate, personal items that complete the picture. Musical lyres for celebration, intricate board games for leisure, and delicate cosmetics for adornment were all carefully placed within the tombs. These were not just symbols of status, they were provisions for a journey. The Sumerians were not burying their dead, they were equipping them for a new existence. This elaborate send-off forces us to ask a profound question. What does this say about the very origins of our belief in an afterlife? Here, at the dawn of urban civilization, we see a concept of death that mirrors the strict social order of life, suggesting that humanity's earliest hopes for what lies beyond were deeply intertwined with the world they already knew. The silent, painted armies of Sumer were not alone in their quest for eternity. On the other side of the world, an emperor prepared for his own endless reign with a force of clay and ambition. In 210 BCE, China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, was sealed within a tomb complex guarded by an army of more than 8,000 life-sized soldiers. This is the Terracotta Army of Xi'an, a silent garrison buried for over 2,000 years. Each soldier was an individual, crafted with unique facial features, hairstyles, and even expressions, reflecting the diverse ethnicities of the emperor's vast empire. They were not a faceless horde, but a meticulously organized military force, complete with generals, officers, and infantrymen, all arranged in precise battle formations alongside 130 chariots and 670 horses. This was not merely a grand grave, it was a declaration. The emperor, who unified China and standardized everything from writing to the width of cart axles, intended to rule the afterlife with the same absolute authority he wielded in life. The entire complex is a map of his cosmic ambition. Ancient texts describe a sprawling underground palace, with ceilings inlaid with pearls to mimic the stars and rivers of flowing mercury. For a long time, these accounts were dismissed as legend, but recent archaeological surveys using ground-penetrating radar have detected massive, unexplained chambers and dangerously high levels of mercury in the soil, suggesting those ancient stories were rooted in a startling reality. This emperor did not just want an army, he wanted to recreate his entire universe underground. Imagine the sheer scale of the operation. Workshops across the empire employed thousands of artisans in a standardized assembly line process. The torsos, heads, arms, and legs were created separately in molds, then assembled and customized with unique details before being fired in colossal kilns. They were originally painted in vibrant pigments from magenta tunics to green trousers, and they held real, functional bronze weapons. Most of the color has flaked away, and the wooden chariots have long since decayed, but the remaining figures still stand in formidable silence. This project required a logistical and artistic mastery that challenges everything we thought we knew about the capabilities of the ancient world. It forces us to ask what drove such an immense undertaking. The answer lies in a deep-seated belief in immortality and cosmic order. The emperor was obsessed with conquering death itself, sending expeditions to find elixirs of life. His tomb was his ultimate backup plan, a way to ensure his power would continue unabated, sustained by an eternal administration, and defended by an eternal army. How many other secrets does that unexcavated central tomb still hold? High in the windswept Altai Mountains, where Russia, Mongolia, and China meet, the ice has guarded secrets for 2,500 years. Here, the Scythians, fierce nomadic warriors who dominated the Eurasian steppes, built their final resting places on the mountaintops. These were not simple graves for a wandering people, but monumental burial mounds known as kurgans, stone-covered earthen hills that dotted the landscape like silent sentinels. Within these frozen tombs, a world of astonishing artistry and spiritual depth was locked in time by the region's perpetual permafrost. The ice did not just preserve bones and gold, it saved the entire organic world of the Scythians, their textiles, their woodwork, and even the intricate tattoos that adorned their skin. When archaeologists opened the famous Pazyryk burials, they were not met with dust, but with a vibrant snapshot of a lost culture. They found a chieftain wearing a striking tattoo of a stag, its antlers curling into elaborate patterns, a permanent symbol of status and belief. They uncovered the world's oldest known pile carpet, its rich colors and complex patterns weaving a story of luxury and extensive trade. This was no isolated band of barbarians, as their settled enemies often described them. This was a sophisticated society connected to the great civilizations of Persia and China, a hub in a vast network of exchange that stretched across the continent. Their tombs were equipped for an epic journey. Alongside the chieftains, their entire horses, once proud and powerful, were sacrificed and laid to rest with elaborate saddles and bridles. These were not just possessions, they were vital companions for the afterlife. Perhaps most revealing were the small tents and bronze braziers found alongside the bodies, equipment used for burning cannabis seeds. The ancient Greek historian Herodotus wrote of the Scythians using vapor baths that induced howls of joy, and here was the physical proof. This suggests that their funeral rites involved communal altered states of consciousness, a ritualistic passage meant to bridge the world of the living and the dead. So what do these frozen time capsules truly teach us? They force a complete re-evaluation of the nomadic way of life. The Scythians were not primitive raiders, but a people with a complex spiritual worldview, masterful artists in metal and leather, and key players in the cultural and economic exchanges that shaped the ancient world. Their kurgans stand as a powerful reminder that history is not only written by those who build cities, but also by those who master the vast, open spaces between them. Far beneath the sun-baked islands of Malta, a different kind of temple awaited discovery, a sanctuary not for the living but for the dead. While the Scythians built skyward on their mountain peaks, an ancient people on these Mediterranean islands carved a labyrinthine underworld directly from the living rock. The Hal Saflieni Hypogeum is a breathtaking underground burial complex, a maze of chambers and halls spread over 3 distinct levels, all painstakingly excavated with stone and antler tools over many generations, starting around 3600 BCE. This was not a simple cemetery. It was an architectural marvel, a subterranean echo of the massive stone temples that stood above ground, like the nearby Xi'an temples. Within this dark, silent world, the bones of approximately 7,000 individuals were carefully laid to rest, a practice that speaks of a profound, collective view of death. This was not about individual glory, but about the eternal unity of the community. The walls of this sacred space are adorned with intricate spiral patterns and carvings, the same symbols found on the great stone blocks of the above-ground temples. This visual language connected the world of the living with the realm of the ancestors, blurring the line between life and death into a single, continuous spiritual existence. But the Hypogeum holds an even more mysterious secret, one you can hear. One particular chamber, known as the Oracle Room, possesses an extraordinary acoustic property. A deep voice spoken into a small niche resonates throughout the entire chamber with a powerful, vibrating hum that can be felt in your bones. This was not an accident. This was engineered. In a society without written language, sound itself may have been a sacred technology, a way to induce altered states of consciousness and communicate with the spirit world. The architecture reveals another layer of sophistication. Certain chambers are precisely aligned so that during the equinoxes, a single shaft of sunlight penetrates the deep darkness, illuminating a specific niche for just a few moments. This proves a sophisticated understanding of solar cycles, integrating the rhythm of the cosmos into the very heart of their funerary rites. How did a seemingly isolated island culture without metal tools or the wheel achieve such a feat of engineering, astronomy, and acoustics? The sheer scale of the Hypogeum, the coordination required to build it, and the complex knowledge encoded in its stones all point to a highly organized and spiritually advanced society that thrived for over 1,000 years, only to vanish mysteriously, leaving behind these silent stone questions. What kind of worldview was powerful enough to inspire the creation of an entire underworld by hand? While the Maltese carved their underworld from stone, another desert culture was etching its soul onto the very surface of the earth. In the stark, arid plains of southern Peru, the Nazca people created a landscape of death and divinity that can only be comprehended from the heavens. Their famous geoglyphs, the vast lines and figures of spiders, hummingbirds, and monkeys sprawling across the desert floor, were not meant for human eyes at ground level. Instead, these immense drawings may have served as sacred pathways, connecting ceremonial centers like Cahuachi to the burial places of the elite. This was a ritual landscape where the boundary between the living and the dead was as thin as the lines scratched into the dark desert varnish. At the heart of this spiritual geography lay Cahuachi, a major ceremonial center built from towering adobe pyramids. Here, the Nazca buried their most important individuals in a state of breathtaking preservation. The extreme dryness of the desert acted as a perfect natural vault, protecting the dead for nearly 2,000 years. When archaeologists open these tombs, they do not find mere skeletons, but complete individuals, swaddled in layers of intricate, multicolored textiles. These fabrics are masterpieces, woven with vivid depictions of mythological beings, snarling feline gods, and radiant anthropomorphic figures. The bodies were often accompanied by gold masks, elaborate headdresses, and finely crafted panpipes and drums, suggesting a funeral filled with music and ceremony meant to accompany the soul on its journey. Yet, one discovery adds a more complex and, to our modern sensibilities, a more disturbing layer to these burials: the presence of trophy heads. These were not the skulls of revered ancestors, but the severed heads of enemies, often modified with a hole drilled in the forehead so they could be suspended by a cord. For a long time, this was seen as simple evidence of warfare and ritual violence, but the story is not so straightforward. Many of these heads show signs of careful preservation and were buried with the same respect as the elite, sometimes even nestled within the same sacred bundles. This suggests the Nazca viewed these heads not just as war trophies, but as containers of a powerful spiritual essence, a supernatural force that could be captured, controlled, and perhaps even harnessed by the community. How do we reconcile this practice with their incredible artistic sophistication? The answer may lie in their harsh environment. Living in one of the driest places on Earth, the Nazca world, you was likely centered on a constant struggle to maintain cosmic and ecological balance. Water, fertility, and life itself were precarious gifts. In this context, death rituals were not merely symbolic, they were a practical necessity for sustaining the community. The burial of a powerful leader, wrapped in textiles depicting life-giving deities and accompanied by objects of power, including the captured essence of enemies, may have been seen as a vital act to ensure the continuation of rain and the fertility of the land. Their art, their music, and even their trophies were all part of a single, integrated system to negotiate with the forces that governed their fragile world. What does it say about humanity that our most beautiful creations can sometimes be so intimately tied to our most primal understandings of power and survival? 6,000 years before the first pharaoh ruled Egypt, a haunting ritual was unfolding in the cold, still waters of a Scandinavian lake. At a site now called Kanaljorden in Sweden, archaeologists uncovered a scene that seems to belong more to myth than to prehistory. Lying on the ancient lakebed were the skulls of men, women, and children, carefully arranged on wooden stakes. Some of these skulls held an even more unsettling secret: the fractured pieces of another person's cranium nested inside them. This was not a random act of violence left to be forgotten. This was a deliberate, sacred display by Mesolithic hunter-gatherers around 8,000 years ago. The stakes had been driven into the lake bottom to create a visible, structured monument, a gallery of the dead that would have been partially visible through the clear water. The placement was precise, with the skulls of men and women positioned separately, suggesting a ritual governed by strict rules and a deep symbolic logic. How do we begin to understand a practice so distant from our own modern sensibilities? The evidence points away from simple trophy-taking. The inclusion of women's and children's skulls, and the fact that many showed signs of healing from their injuries, indicates these were likely members of the community, not slain enemies. This was probably an elaborate form of ancestor veneration, a way of physically connecting with the dead long after their passing. By curating their skulls and displaying them in this communal, watery space, these hunter-gatherers were creating a permanent link to their past, a tangible anchor for their collective memory and identity. The skulls themselves tell a story of a hard and precarious life. Analysis of the bones reveals periods of severe nutritional stress and healed fractures from both accidents and violence. Life was a constant struggle, and death was a familiar presence. In this context, the ritual at the lake takes on a new meaning. It may have been a way to manage the trauma of loss, to honor those who had endured the same hardships, and to assert a group's claim over a territory that sustained them. The true revolution of this discovery lies in its timing. For a long time, we believed that such complex symbolic thought, the kind that builds monuments and performs multi-stage rituals, only emerged with the stability of farming societies. The logic was simple: you need a food surplus to support the priests and artists who don't hunt or gather. The sunken skulls shatter that assumption entirely. Here, in the heart of the Stone Age, a community living a nomadic life was engaging in a spiritual practice that required planning, coordination, and a shared belief system sophisticated enough to encompass concepts of ancestry, memory, and the soul's journey. This was not a primitive precursor to civilization. This was the human mind in full, creative, and spiritual flower. It forces us to ask a fundamental question: did civilization invent complex thought, or did complex thought, born around campfires and in sacred lakes, ultimately invent civilization? The logic of the pyramid reached its ultimate expression not in Egypt, but in the deserts of Peru. In 1987, archaeologists working at a mud brick pyramid called Huacarojada made a discovery that would rewrite the history of the Americas: the undisturbed tomb of a Moch ruler now known as the Lord of Sipán. Dating to around 300 CE, this was the richest pre-Columbian burial ever unearthed, a king's ransom in gold and silver that had escaped the notice of grave robbers for 17 centuries. The Lord himself was entombed in a wooden coffin, his body adorned with the emblems of a living god. He wore a great golden crescent headdress, intricate gold nose ornaments, and silver sandals. In his hands he held a gold scepter and a silver one, symbols of his dual authority over the spiritual and earthly realms. His neck was layered with necklaces of solid gold peanuts, each one a symbol of fertility and abundance. But the true measure of his power lay not just in his possessions, but in his companions. To serve him in the afterlife, he was accompanied by a full retinue of sacrificed attendants, including warriors with amputated feet to prevent them from leaving their posts, priests, several young women, a child, and even a dog. Each person was placed in a specific position around him, recreating the structure of his royal court for eternity. The pyramid itself was a layered archive of Moch life and belief. Multiple burial chambers were stacked with hundreds of ceramic vessels, each one a masterpiece. Some depicted elaborate mythological battles between deities, while others showed shockingly intimate scenes of daily life, from healing ceremonies to sexual acts. This was not just art for art's sake. It was a comprehensive visual library of their entire worldview. The preservation was so exceptional that delicate materials survived, including vibrant textiles and headdresses made from the iridescent feathers of tropical birds, revealing an artistic sophistication and a trade network that stretched deep into the Amazon rainforest. So what does this elaborate royal send-off truly tell us? The Lord of Sipán's tomb provides the first undeniable proof of a divine kingship in the ancient Andes. His burial was a theatrical performance of power, designed to legitimize his lineage's rule by demonstrating their unique connection to the gods. The sacrifice of his court was the ultimate expression of this belief, showing that a ruler's authority was so absolute it could command loyalty beyond death itself. This was a society built on a stark hierarchy, where the king was the pivotal link between the human world and the cosmic order, responsible for ensuring the balance of nature and the fertility of the land. His incredible wealth was not merely for show. It was the essential Chinese letter of his divine role. The carefully arranged skulls of Kanaljorden speak of a community honoring its own, but another grave tells a far darker story. In a quiet field in Talheim, Germany, lies a pit that holds the brutal truth about one of humanity's great transitions. Around 5000 BCE, just as farming was taking root in Europe, an entire community of 34 people was massacred and thrown into a single, hasty grave. These were not warriors, but men, women, and children, all members of a single extended family according to dental evidence. The violence was intimate and overwhelming. The backs of their skulls were crushed by the same type of weapon, the polished stone adzes that were the very tools of their new agricultural life. This was not a skirmish, but a coordinated, close-quarters attack that left no one alive. There were no offerings placed with them, no careful arrangement of the bodies, only the stark evidence of a community erased in a single, terrible event. For a long time, we imagined the shift from nomadic hunting to settled farming as a peaceful revolution, a steady march toward civilization. The Talheim Death Pit shatters that illusion. It shows us that the very things that made farming so successful, the claim to a specific piece of land, the stored surplus of grain, the growth of a stationary population, also created something entirely new, a reason for organized, intergroup violence. When your wealth is tied to a specific field, that field becomes worth killing for and worth dying to defend. This was not random brutality. It was warfare in its earliest form. The dream of a settled, peaceful life seems to have contained the seeds of its own nightmare. How many other tranquil-looking fields across the globe hold similar secrets, reminding us that progress and conflict have always been deeply, tragically intertwined? The transition from the Talheim Death Pit's grim testimony to the Viking Age offers a stunning contrast in how a society can channel its world view into death. In the soft clay of a Norwegian farm, a different kind of power was being buried, one that sailed. The Oseberg ship, interred around 834 CE, is a masterpiece of Norse shipbuilding, a graceful vessel over 20 meters long that was dragged inland to serve as an eternal tomb for two women. It was not an empty symbol, but a fully stocked ark for the afterlife, filled with everything needed for a journey of cosmic proportions. The burial chamber amidships held their bodies on an ornate wooden bed, surrounded by lavishly carved wooden carts, sleighs, and chests bursting with personal items, from down-filled bedding and woolen clothing to iron cooking cauldrons and a full set of farming tools. The attention to detail was breathtaking. Even the remains of a tent and a bucket of wild apples were included. To complete their household, the graves of 15 sacrificed horses, 4 dogs, and an ox were arranged around the ship, a menagerie meant to serve them beyond death. For over a century, this burial was interpreted as the tomb of a queen and her servant, but recent DNA analysis has rewritten this story entirely. The two women were not mother and daughter, as once presumed, and one of them, the elder, carried a genetic signature linking her to the Black Sea region far to the southeast. This single discovery shatters the stereotype of Viking society as a purely patriarchal world of male warriors and explorers. Here was a woman of immense, likely royal status, who had either traveled vast distances herself or was so important that her origins were remembered and honored in her burial. She was accompanied by another high-status woman, their grave goods speaking of influence that spanned the domestic, economic, and spiritual realms. The presence of a ritual staff often associated with the Völva, or Cyrus, suggests one of them may have held a powerful religious office, a role that commanded as much respect as any king. The ship itself was the ultimate expression of their beliefs. In Norse cosmology, the journey to the afterlife could be a dangerous voyage to realms like Hell or Valhalla. The ship was the vessel that would carry the soul safely through these trials. Its sleek form a direct reflection of a culture whose identity, trade, and expansion were inextricably linked to the sea. Every rivet and carved spiral on the Oseberg ship, and the equally impressive Gokstad ship buried nearby, was a testament to a society that did not just live on the water, but thought of existence itself as a voyage. So what do these floating tombs truly reveal? They show us a Viking world far more complex than the sagas of raiders, a society where women could wield profound secular and religious authority, and where the intricate networks of trade and cultural exchange stretched across continents. Their death rites were a perfect mirror of their life, a final, well-provisioned expedition into the unknown, proving that for the Norse, the horizon was never an end but a beginning. The Jomon people of ancient Japan saw no wall between life and death, a truth etched into their very garbage. For over 14,000 years, from around 14,000 to 300 BCE, these prehistoric communities buried their loved ones directly within their shell middens, the vast mounds of discarded shells, animal bones, and broken pottery that accumulated near their settlements. Here, in the heart of daily life, human remains rested alongside the refuse of countless meals. These were not hidden graves, but integrated spaces where the dead remained present, their skeletons carefully placed in a flexed, fetal-like position and often sprinkled with vibrant red ochre, a pigment symbolizing life and rebirth. This practice reveals a worldview where death was not a departure, but a continuation within the cycle of the community. The deceased were not sent away to a separate sacred ground. They were kept close, their physical presence a constant reminder of their place in the family and the village. What does it mean to bury your ancestors in the same soil that holds your dinner scraps? It suggests a profound intimacy with the processes of existence, where nourishment, creation, decay, and memory were all part of one continuous, unbroken flow. The Jomon reinforced this connection with beautiful, mysterious artifacts buried alongside the bodies, the dogu. These elaborate clay figurines, often depicting humanoid forms with large, hypnotic eyes and exaggerated features, were likely spiritual conduits. Some theories suggest they were effigies meant to absorb illness or misfortune, protecting the living and the dead. They were crafted with the same distinctive cord mark technique that defines Jomon pottery, a name that literally means cord pattern. These pots are among the oldest in the world, and they were not just utilitarian. Their intricate, flame-like rims and complex surface patterns show an artistic spirit that flourished for millennia. Burying these vessels with the dead equipped them for a spiritual existence that mirrored their physical one. Modern science has peered into these ancient middens and found remarkable details. Analysis of the dental calculus, the hardened plaque on Jomon teeth, has opened a window onto their diet. It reveals they were not simple hunter-gatherers, but sophisticated foragers who managed their environment with incredible skill. They consumed a diverse array of nuts, roots, and plants, and evidence now suggests they were practicing a form of early agriculture, cultivating beans and other crops long before the arrival of full-scale rice farming. This paints a picture of a stable, sustainable society deeply attuned to their natural world. Their burial practices complete this picture. By placing their dead within the Midden, they were returning them to the cycle of life in the most literal way possible. The shell mounds were not seen as filthy waste, but as a testament to the community's sustenance, a rich layering of life that now included the bones of those who had lived it. This challenges our most basic assumptions about sacred and profane space. For the Jomon, the spiritual was not confined to a temple. It was embedded in the very act of living, eating, and discarding. The divine was in the dirt, and the ancestors were always home. Deep beneath the bustling streets of modern Paris lies a silent, parallel city built entirely of bone. The catacombs hold the carefully arranged remains of approximately 6 million people, a number that eclipses the living population of the city above. This was not an ancient ritual, but a radical urban solution born of crisis. By the late 18th century, Parisian cemeteries were overflowing to a horrifying degree, contaminating water supplies and creating unbearable miasmas that threatened public health. The city made a drastic decision to empty its churchyards and transfer the dead into a vast network of abandoned limestone quarries. What followed was one of history's most surreal and sobering public works projects. For years, every night under the cover of darkness, a solemn procession would wind through the city, black-draped carts overflowing with bones and escorted by chanting priests carried the anonymous dead on their final journey from the world of light to the kingdom of shadow. This was not a disrespectful disposal, but an operation conducted with a surprising, solemn reverence. Once underground, the bones were not simply dumped. They were meticulously sorted and arranged by a dedicated workforce into a strangely beautiful, macabre architecture. Skulls and femurs were stacked with geometric precision, forming walls of patterned humanity, with rows of skulls creating grim decorative friezes. This careful curation transformed a chaotic heap of remains into a structured, almost sacred space. It was an attempt to impose order on the ultimate chaos of death, to grant a collective dignity to the anonymous millions. The walls are punctuated with stone tablets bearing inscriptions that speak directly to the visitor. One reads, "Halt, this is the empire of death." These are not mere labels, but profound philosophical reflections from the Age of Enlightenment, a time when reason and mortality were constant companions. They blend macabre humor with deep existential contemplation, reminding the living of their shared fate. This massive reorganization of the dead reveals a pivotal moment in human history, when society began to view death through the dual lenses of public hygiene and rational thought. The catacombs are a physical manifestation of the Enlightenment's core conflict, the struggle to reconcile scientific progress with the timeless, spiritual mystery of mortality. They show a society grappling with the practical problem of urban decay, while still feeling the need to honor the dead with a kind of solemn, artistic order. What does it say about us that when faced with an overwhelming logistical problem of our own making, we still feel compelled to build walls of skulls with such care and to inscribe them with poetry? The bones of a single child can carry the weight of an entire continent's history. In western Montana, a rugged landscape of mountains and plains, a rancher in 1968 stumbled upon a discovery that would become the most important burial in the Americas, the Anzick site. Here, approximately 13,000 years ago, the Clovis people, long considered the first human culture to spread across North America, laid one of their own to rest. The body of a young boy, no more than 2 years old, was carefully buried beneath a limestone slab, surrounded by an astonishing array of more than 100 stone and bone tools. This was not a simple grave, it was a treasure chest of early American technology, containing exquisitely crafted spear points, rods made from elk antler, and animal bones, all ritually covered in a blanket of vibrant red ochre. For decades, the Anzick Child was an archaeological puzzle, a symbol of a mysterious and vanished culture defined by its distinctively fluted stone projectile points. But then, modern science gave this ancient boy a voice. Genetic sequencing of his remains revealed a truth that resonated across millennia. He was a direct ancestor of nearly every modern Native American population living today. This single DNA profile provided the most powerful evidence yet for the theory that the first peoples entered the Americas from Siberia via a land bridge, migrating southward along the ice-free corridor. The child was not an isolated branch on the human family tree, but a foundational root. Why would a small child be given such an extraordinarily rich burial? The sheer quantity and quality of the grave goods suggest he held a profoundly special status, perhaps the son of a revered leader or a clan chief. His send-off was an immense investment for a small, nomadic band of hunter-gatherers. Each of those perfectly fluted spear points represented hours of skilled labor, a vital piece of survival technology willingly removed from circulation and sealed in the earth. This act speaks of a deep love for the child, but also of a critical belief that his journey into the afterlife was essential for the entire community's well-being. His safe passage, equipped with the finest tools his people could make, may have been seen as a necessary offering to the spirits of the game they hunted or the land they inhabited. The red ochre tells another story, one that stretches back even further in time. This practice of sprinkling the dead with this life-giving pigment is not unique to the Americas. We see it in the Jomon Middens of Japan and thousands of years earlier in the deepest graves of prehistoric Europe and Asia. The Clovis people, at the very edge of the known world, were still practicing a ritual their ancestors had carried with them from another continent. This was a cultural memory written in red dust, a tangible link to a homeland left behind countless generations before. The Anzick burial collapses time, connecting a toddler in Montana to a migration epic in scale. It shows us that the peopling of the Americas was not a single event, but a continuous flow of people, their tools, and their deepest beliefs carried in the heart of a child. Within the dense jungles of Palenque, a pyramid temple guards the story of a king who sought to conquer death itself. In the 7th century CE, the Maya ruler Xi'an Pakal, known as Pakal the Great, was laid to rest in a secret crypt deep within the Temple of the Inscriptions. His tomb, discovered in 1952 after 4 years of clearing a rubble-filled stairway, remains one of the most profound and elaborate royal burials ever found in the Americas. The heart of the chamber was a single, massive stone sarcophagus, its 5-ton lid intricately carved with a cosmic map of Pakal's journey. The image is breathtaking in its complexity. The king is shown at the moment of his death falling down the world tree, a great ceiba that connected the underworld, the earth, and the heavens. He is not descending into darkness, but is being reborn, emerging from the jaws of the underworld as the young maize god, a symbol of life, renewal, and resurrection. This single piece of stone art is a complete theological statement, illustrating the Maya belief that death was not an end, but a necessary passage through a terrifying realm toward eventual rebirth. The king's body was a sacred vessel prepared for this transformation. He was adorned in jade from head to toe, a stone more precious than gold to the Maya, representing water, vitality, and eternal life. A mosaic death mask of more than 200 pieces of jade covered his face, its inlaid eyes of shell and obsidian giving him a serene, living gaze for all eternity. Jade rings adorned his fingers, jade beads filled his mouth, and heavy jade ear spools stretched his lobes. He was the living embodiment of the maize god, and his burial was the final, essential act to ensure his divine essence would sprout again, just as a seed of corn is buried to produce new life. The chamber itself was a microcosm of the Maya universe. Painted stucco reliefs on the walls depicted the 9 lords of the night, the deities who governed the underworld. Ceramic vessels placed around the sarcophagus contained food and drink, practical sustenance for the arduous journey ahead, while hieroglyphic texts carved on the temple's inner walls meticulously recorded his lineage and his 68-year reign, anchoring his mythic rebirth in the concrete history of his dynasty. The entire temple was a machine for resurrection, engineered with astonishing precision. A hidden, corbel-vaulted stairway led from the temple summit down to the tomb, an architectural feat that sealed the king away while symbolically connecting him to the celestial realm. A unique stone tube, known as a psychoduct, runs from the sarcophagus up the stairway and into the temple floor above. This was not a ventilation shaft, but a spiritual conduit, a pathway for the king's soul, or way, to travel between his physical remains and the world of the living, allowing him to continue participating in rituals and receiving offerings. How do we interpret this symphony of symbols and engineering? Pakal's tomb reveals a world where the king was the pivotal link between humanity and the gods. His death and successful rebirth were not personal affairs, but cosmic events essential for maintaining the balance of the world. If the king failed his underworld trials, the sun might not rise, the rains might not fall, and chaos could engulf the kingdom. His elaborate burial was a collective act of faith, a grand performance designed to guarantee the continuation of time itself. It shows us a civilization that looked into the abyss of mortality and built a pyramid of stone and belief to bridge it. 5,000 years before the pyramids of Egypt, a society on the shores of the Black Sea was redefining the meaning of wealth and power. In 1972, just outside the modern city of Varna, Bulgaria, excavators uncovered a Neolithic cemetery that would shatter our understanding of early human society. The graves, dating to between 4,560 and 4,450 BCE, held a secret that glittered in the earth, the world's oldest processed gold. This was not just a few simple beads, but a stunning collection of more than 3,000 gold artifacts, a treasure that predates the riches of Ur and the first Egyptian dynasties by over a millennium. Here, in a time we once thought of as simple and communal, a profound revolution was taking place. The Varna gold was crafted into elaborate ornaments, heavy bracelets, intricate pendants, and even scepters of power. Ceramic vessels were clad in shimmering gold leaf, turning simple pottery into objects of breathtaking luxury. The craftsmanship was not primitive. It displayed a sophisticated understanding of metallurgy, with artisans expertly hammering and heating native gold into symbolic forms. But the true mystery is not just that they could make these things, it is that they chose to bury them forever. In a society without a written language or monumental architecture, this represented an immense concentration of labor and value. To take such wealth out of circulation was a conscious, powerful act. It suggests a belief system where status was not just for the world of the living, but was an inalienable possession, a divine right that had to accompany the individual into the next life. The cemetery itself paints a stark picture of this new social order. A handful of graves, perhaps those of chieftains or priest kings, are overflowing with treasures. One single grave, known as Grave 43, contained more gold than has been found in all other archaeological sites from that period across the entire world combined. The occupant was a man buried with a stunning array of gold ornaments, a stone scepter, a gold penis sheath, and beautifully crafted copper tools. Yet, just a few meters away, other graves held only a simple pot or two, and some contained nothing at all. This is not a random distribution of goods, it is a clear and deliberate blueprint for a stratified society. The message was etched into the landscape of the dead: your status in life determines your worth in death. This is the first undeniable evidence of a fully developed social hierarchy in human history. What we are witnessing at Varna is the very birth of inherited inequality. The concentration of such unimaginable wealth in a few graves points to a system where power and privilege were no longer earned through personal prowess alone, but were passed down through bloodlines. This was the emergence of a ruling class, an early form of kingship that would become the model for civilizations to come. How does this quiet Bulgarian cemetery force us to rethink our past? It proves that the human impulse to create social classes, to separate the elite from the commoner, did not begin in the famed river valleys of the Middle East. It first flickered to life centuries earlier among the communities of the Balkan coast, where the world's first goldsmiths discovered that true power could be forged not just in metal, but in the very structure of society itself. While the Varna elite were being sent to the afterlife draped in gold, a very different kind of preservation was happening on the other side of the world. In the slow, dark waters of a Florida peat bog, time itself seemed to stop. At the Windover archaeological site, a small, stagnant pond became a sacred cemetery for an archaic period people between 6000 and 5000 BCE. The conditions here were not grand or golden, but they were perfect. The water was acidic, cold, and most importantly, devoid of oxygen. This unique environment created a natural time capsule, one that performed a miracle of preservation that defies all expectation. When archaeologists began their work in the 1980s, they made a discovery that sent a shockwave through the scientific community. They found not just bones, but the actual brain tissue of 91 individuals, their neural matter preserved for over 7,000 years. To hold the skull of an ancient person and find their brain still soft and intact is an experience that redefines our connection to the deep past. These were not just skeletons, they were people, and the bog had saved the very organ of their thoughts and memories. The burials were profoundly intentional. The bodies were carefully laid in the pond, often pinned gently to the peat bottom with wooden stakes, as if to ensure they would not drift away from their final resting place. They were not thrown in as trash, but placed with clear purpose in a designated burial ground. Many were buried with textiles, intricate fabrics woven from plant fibers that would have completely decomposed in almost any other environment. These were not shrouds, but likely their everyday clothing, a final gift for the journey. The grave goods tell a story of a practical, resourceful life. Tools made from bone and antler were placed alongside them, including simple weapons for hunting and sharp awls for working hides. This was a complete toolkit for eternity, suggesting a powerful belief that the afterlife was a continuation of the daily rhythms of existence. You would need your tools, your clothes, and your wits about you. The analysis of these remains has been revelatory. DNA extracted from the bones shows a direct genetic lineage to modern Native American populations, a living thread connecting the present to a world that existed thousands of years before the pyramids were built. Even more telling is what the preserved brains do not show. There is no evidence of violent trauma or chronic malnutrition. This was not a community plagued by warfare or famine. The picture that emerges is one of stability, of a people successfully adapted to their environment. The very fact that they returned to the same pond to bury their dead for over 1,000 years speaks to a deep, uninterrupted cultural tradition and a profound attachment to a specific sacred place. So what is the ultimate message of Windover? It is a reminder that history is not only written in grand monuments and golden treasures. Sometimes the most profound truths are found in the quiet, dark mud, in the preserved thoughts of a people who saw death not as a terrifying void, but as a familiar pond where life simply continued in another form. It challenges us to look beyond stone and metal and to listen for the whispers of the past in the most fragile, organic remains. 6 centuries before our common era, a different kind of emperor was laid to rest. In the windswept plain of Pasargadae, the tomb of Cyrus the Great stands not as a pyramid or a great mound, but as a simple, elegant house of stone atop a modest, 6-tiered platform. This was the final resting place of the founder of the vast Achaemenid Persian Empire, and its design speaks volumes about the man himself. After a lifetime of conquering lands from the Indus River to the Aegean Sea, Cyrus chose a burial of striking restraint. Ancient historians wrote that his body once rested in a golden sarcophagus, surrounded by his finest weapons and treasures, all long since plundered. But the structure itself remains a quiet testament to a revolutionary style of leadership. Where other rulers built colossal monuments to their own glory, Cyrus built a tomb that reflected his philosophy of power, one based not on terror, but on tolerance and pragmatic wisdom. Look closer at the stones and you see the blueprint of an empire. The tomb's design is a deliberate fusion, incorporating architectural cues from the many cultures Cyrus had brought under his rule. You can see the influence of Mesopotamian stepped platforms, the elegant proportions of Greek temples, and the solid masonry of Egyptian builders. This was not a random assortment of styles, but a calculated political statement. The empire was a mosaic of different peoples, and Cyrus' administration was built on respecting their local traditions, languages, and gods. He presented himself not as a foreign oppressor to be feared, but as a legitimate ruler for each of his diverse subjects. This philosophy was literally set in stone on the famous Cyrus cylinder, a clay artifact often called the first charter of human rights, which proclaimed the freedom of conquered peoples to return to their homelands and worship their own deities. His tomb, standing peacefully in the open, embodied this same principle of benevolent inclusion. This respect extended even to the dead. Historical accounts describe an inscription at the tomb that directly addressed any visitor. It reportedly read, "O man, I am Cyrus, son of Cambyses, who founded the empire of the Persians and was king of Asia. Grudge me not therefore this monument." This was more than a simple epitaph. It was a plea for the sanctity of the burial place, an early and powerful concept that a grave, even that of a king, should be a place of peace, immune from the conflicts of the living world. This notion of respect was so powerful that it echoed down through the centuries. Long after Cyrus was gone, later Persian kings, including the mighty Xerxes and Darius, would make pilgrimages to this site. They came not just to honor a founder, but to reconnect with the ideal of just kingship that Cyrus represented. In a world of palace intrigues and brutal power struggles, this simple stone house served as a moral compass, a physical reminder that true authority could be paired with humility and cultural intelligence. How many of history's grander tombs, built for intimidation, have inspired such lasting devotion? The legacy of Cyrus was not sealed in gold, but in the enduring power of a modest idea that an empire is strongest when it builds upon the strengths of all its people. A single cave in the Zagros Mountains of Iraq holds the broken bones that rewrite the story of humanity. For decades, we pictured Neanderthals as primitive brutes, but the graves within Shanidar Cave tell a different tale entirely. Here, around 60,000 years ago, these ancient cousins of ours buried their dead with a care that speaks of deep feeling. The most famous of these individuals is Shanidar IV, a skeleton found surrounded by dense clusters of flower pollen. When this was first discovered in the 1960s, it painted a poignant picture, a funeral where mourners covered their lost one in blossoms like hyacinths and hollyhocks. It was a scene of such tenderness that it shattered the old, simplistic image of the club-wielding caveman. Recent studies have questioned if the pollen was brought by burrowing rodents rather than by grieving hands, but even this scientific debate cannot erase the larger truth the cave reveals. The real evidence of compassion is written in the bones themselves. One man, known as Shanidar I, lived for years after suffering a crushing blow to his head that likely blinded him in one eye. His right arm was withered and amputated, and he had a crippling injury to his right leg, leaving him with a severe limp. In a harsh Ice Age world, this man could not have hunted or easily fended for himself. His survival for so long with such profound disabilities is a powerful testament to his community. Someone gathered his food, someone shared their water, and someone protected him from predators. This was not a society that abandoned its weak, it was one that cared for its own. The bodies in the cave were not simply left to decay, They were deliberately placed in shallow pits, sometimes in a fetal position, and often with a cache of stone tools or animal bones laid beside them. This careful treatment suggests a ritual, a purposeful act that goes beyond mere hygiene. It hints at a concept of an afterlife, a belief that the person who was still was, and needed provisions for a journey we can no longer see. The final, breathtaking twist in this story is not in the soil of the cave, but in our own blood. Genetic analysis has proven that Neanderthals did not simply vanish. They merged with our own ancestors. Most people of non-African descent carry a small but significant amount of Neanderthal DNA within them. This means the divide we once imagined is an illusion. They are not a separate branch that broke off, they are part of our own family tree. So what do these compassionate burials truly reveal? They show us that empathy, community, and perhaps even a form of spirituality are not unique inventions of modern humanity. These profound human capacities were already present in another species, a species we loved, fought, and ultimately welcomed into our own genetic blueprint. The story of Shanidar Cave is not just about how they died, but about how they lived and how a part of them still lives on, quite literally, in us. The ghost of a king still walks the fields of Sutton who, in the summer of 1939, as the world stood on the brink of a terrible war, an archaeologist named Basil Brown unearthed the silhouette of a vast ship in an English mound. This was no mere vessel, but a tomb, a 27-meter-long ship dragged from the River Devon, nearly a kilometer inland to serve as the final resting place for a 7th-century East Anglian ruler. Within its buried hull lay a chamber filled with treasures that would redefine the so-called Dark Ages. Here was a king's arsenal, a warrior's regalia of iron spears and a magnificent sword, his shield a masterpiece of metalwork and animal art. His wealth was staggering: heavy gold belt buckles, intricate shoulder clasps inlaid with garnet, and silver bowls and spoons that had traveled all the way from the Byzantine Empire. The most iconic find was the Sutton Hoo helmet, a face of iron and bronze with a mustache and eyebrows of gleaming garnet, a piece that is both a functional piece of armor and a terrifying, otherworldly mask. This was the grave of a man who commanded respect across continents, a node in a trade network that connected the cold North Sea to the warm Mediterranean. Yet for all this splendor, the central mystery remains: the king's body is gone. The acidic soil dissolved all physical traces, leaving behind only the ghostly impression of his bones and a collection of personal possessions so intimate they feel like his echo. Was this a cenotaph, a memorial for a king lost at sea, or did his people simply believe that the objects of his power were the true vessels of his soul? This magnificent burial captures a society at a crossroads. The ship itself is a profoundly pagan symbol, a vessel for the journey to the afterlife, dragged by the labor of hundreds to honor a Germanic warrior tradition. But the silver spoons found beside him bear the names of the apostles Paul and Saul, and the 2 small silver baptismal bowls suggest a man perhaps flirting with the new faith of Christianity. He was buried with the tools of the old world, but he was in contact with the ideas of the new. Sutton, who does not show a clean break from paganism to Christianity, but a messy, personal, and deeply political fusion. A king in this time had to be both a traditional warrior, worthy of an epic poem like Beowulf, and a sophisticated statesman engaging with the continent and its new religion. His burial was a statement to both his own people and to rival kingdoms, a declaration that his authority was rooted in ancestral glory, yet open to the future. So what does this empty ship truly tell us? It illuminates the very moment English identity was being forged, not in purity, but in the complex, shimmering fusion of old and new, local and global, the pagan ship and the Christian cross. The Chinchorro mummies were not hidden away in tombs, but were present members of the community. In the stark, coastal landscape of the Atacama Desert, the oldest artificially preserved humans in the world were not kings or pharaohs, but everyday people. Beginning around 5000 BCE, 2000 years before the first Egyptian experiments with preservation, these hunter-gatherers developed a startlingly complex mummification ritual. They did not simply dry a body, they completely remade it. The process was an intimate, physical act of love and reverence. The skin was carefully removed, the organs were extracted, and the body was dried. Then, using sticks to reinforce the skeleton and white ash or clay to sculpt the muscles and features, they reconstructed the person. The final touch was a skin of black manganese paste or vibrant red ochre, and a wig of human hair, giving the mummy a serene, lifelike mask. This was not a secret science reserved for a priesthood, but a widespread cultural tradition that included men, women, children, and even the tiniest fetuses. The sheer inclusivity of the practice is what makes it so revolutionary. In a world where we are accustomed to royal tombs and elite burials, the Chinchorro present a powerful alternative, a society where the right to an elaborate afterlife was a universal human privilege, not a mark of status. Why would a culture with no agriculture, no cities, and no writing invest such immense effort into every single member of their community? The answer may lie in their ongoing relationship with the dead. These mummy bundles were not buried immediately. They were kept among the living, cared for, and perhaps even involved in rituals for years. They were ancestors physically present, their painted faces a constant reminder of the continuum between life and death. This tradition persisted, virtually unchanged, for over 3,000 years. That is a span of time longer than the Roman Empire, the Renaissance, and the modern industrial age combined. This incredible continuity, in one of the most arid environments on Earth, speaks to a belief system of profound stability. The Chinchorro looked at the fragility of the human body and the certainty of death, and they responded not with fear, but with an act of creative preservation. They denied the finality of decay by literally rebuilding their loved ones, ensuring they remained whole and beautiful within the fabric of daily life. What does this tell us about the human mind? It reveals that long before monuments to power, we were building monuments to memory, and that the earliest answers to the mystery of death were not about escaping it, but about lovingly refusing to let go. While the Chinchorro preserved every person, a kingdom to the north built monuments for a chosen few. South of Egypt, along the fertile Nile in modern Sudan, the kingdom of Kush erected its own pyramids. At sites like El Kuru and Nuri, between around 760 and 650 BCE, Nubian kings and queens were buried beneath sharp, angled peaks that rivaled their Egyptian counterparts in ambition. This was the era of the 25th dynasty, when Kushite pharaohs actually conquered Egypt itself, ruling as the Black Pharaohs. But when they returned home, they did not simply copy the customs of their northern neighbors. They fused them with a deep, local Nubian identity, creating a culture entirely their own. The tombs are a perfect map of this fusion. To reach the burial chamber, you would descend a steep stairway carved deep into the bedrock, passing under the weight of the pyramid above. Inside, the walls are alive with color, covered in paintings that show the king making offerings. He presents gifts to the powerful Egyptian god Ammon, but he also honors distinctly Nubian deities like the lion-headed god Apedemak. This is not a simple imitation, it is a confident statement of a dual identity, a spiritual syncretism where two pantheons coexisted and empowered the ruler. The king's body was prepared for eternity with a mix of technologies. He was laid to rest within a heavy stone sarcophagus, and his organs were carefully removed and placed into canopic jars, a classic Egyptian practice for preservation. Yet the style of the jewelry, the pottery, and the amulets placed beside him were unmistakably Kushite, bearing the artistic signatures of a culture with its own ancient traditions. The sheer wealth in these tombs was staggering, with vast quantities of gold, silver, and semi-precious stones adorning the rulers. This treasure was not just for show, it was the direct result of economic mastery. The kingdom of Kush sat at the crossroads of a continent, controlling the lucrative trade routes that carried gold, ivory, ebony, and exotic animals from the heart of Africa north to the Mediterranean world. Their pyramids were built not just on faith, but on a foundation of immense commercial power. So how do these Nubian monuments force us to redraw the map of history? For too long, the narrative of ancient Africa has been centered overwhelmingly on Egypt, as if it were a lone beacon of civilization. The pyramids of Kush stand as a powerful stone correction to that story. They prove that a sophisticated, powerful, and innovative culture flourished in Nubia, one that was not a mere shadow of its neighbor, but a rival, a conqueror, and a unique civilization that absorbed foreign influences only to remake them into something new and distinctly African. West Kennet Long Barrow rises from the English landscape as a great, grassy mound of earth and stone, a silent monument built by some of Britain's first farmers around 3,650 years before our Common Era. This was not a tomb for a single chieftain, but a communal house for the dead, a place where entire generations were laid to rest together. Inside its long, shadowy chambers, the bones of nearly 50 individuals were not simply left to lie. Over centuries, the living would return, carefully rearranging the skeletons of their predecessors, pushing older bones to the sides to make space for new arrivals. This was not a one-time burial, but an ongoing conversation with the ancestors, a physical curation of memory and lineage that spanned dozens of human lifetimes. The barrow itself was a feat of engineering that required a staggering collective effort, moving thousands of tons of earth and sarsen stones, a project that would have bound the community together in a shared generational purpose. This was more than a cemetery, it was a physical anchor for a new way of life. The alignment of the entrance passage reveals a deep cosmic awareness. It was carefully positioned to catch the rising sun on the midwinter solstice, flooding the inner chambers with a shaft of light that would have transformed the dark, bone-filled space into a sacred, illuminated theater. This connection to the solar cycle shows that these early farmers saw their own cycles of life, death, and rebirth as intrinsically linked to the rhythms of the heavens. Their entire worldview was built upon this integration of the earthly and the celestial. Perhaps the most telling clue comes from the bones themselves. Analysis shows that the people buried inside West Kennet were not all from a single biological family. They were a community of choice, not just of blood. By gathering and mingling the remains of different lineages, these Neolithic people were actively forging a new kind of identity. In a world transitioning from nomadic hunting to settled farming, the definition of family was expanding. Your clan was no longer only those you were born to, but also those you built the monument with, those you farmed the land alongside, and those whose bones you would eventually rest beside. These long barrows, which predate Stonehenge by centuries, represent Europe's first great architectural experiments. They are the foundational stones of a new social order, one where community was literally set in stone, and where the ancestors were not gone, but were active participants in the life of the village, their physical remains serving as a permanent counsel of the past. What does this collective approach to death tell us? It suggests that the first farmers understood a profound truth. that survival itself depended on cooperation that stretched beyond a single lifetime, and that the greatest monument they could build was not to a king, but to each other. Not far from the silent terracotta guardians, a different pit tells a story of blood, not clay. The tomb of the first emperor's own children in Xi'an contains a chilling scene, the skeletons of many young men and women believed to be Qin Shi Huang's own sons and daughters. They were not laid to rest with honor, but executed and cast into a mass grave during the political chaos that erupted after their father's death. Historical records had long suggested that the emperor's heir, Huai, ordered the slaughter of all his siblings to secure his own contested throne, and this grim burial provides the physical proof. The bones themselves bear witness to the brutality. Skeletons show clear signs of decapitation, dismemberment, and fatal arrow wounds, a stark and violent contrast to the orderly, peaceful ranks of the emperor's ceramic army just a short distance away. This was not a ceremonial send-off, but a political purge. The tragedy is made even more personal by the small artifacts found among the remains. Personal seals and delicate pieces of jewelry were discovered, some inscribed with titles that identified these individuals as princes and princesses of the Qin court. They were not anonymous victims, but named members of the royal family, their lives cut short by the very power structure they were born into. This dark chapter forces us to see the Qin dynasty's legacy in a more complex light. The emperor's unification of China was a monumental achievement that reshaped history, but it came at a terrible human cost, a cost paid not just by conscripted laborers and conquered armies, but within the innermost circle of the imperial family itself. The drive for absolute power and stability created a system where even one's own children could be viewed as nothing more than threats to be eliminated. How do we reconcile the breathtaking ambition that built the Great Wall and the Terracotta Army with the intimate brutality of this family massacre? The two sites, standing so close together, form a complete picture of an empire founded on both genius and terror, reminding us that the price of unity was often written in blood. The Yayoi period burial jars of Japan hold a quiet revolution inside their ceramic walls. From around 300 BCE to 300 CE, as wet rice agriculture and metalworking swept across the islands from the mainland, people began laying their dead to rest in large, distinctive jars, often grouping them in dedicated cemeteries that marked a new, settled relationship with the land. These were not plain storage vessels, but carefully crafted containers for the soul, their rounded bodies and flaring rims creating a symbolic womb for rebirth. The shift from the earlier Jomon practice of Midden burials to this new custom speaks of a profound cultural transformation, a tangible link to the Korean peninsula and China where similar jar burial traditions flourished. Yet the Yayoi people were not mere imitators. They made the practice their own, decorating their jars with simple, bold patterns that reflected a unique aesthetic spirit. Inside these ceramic cocoons, archaeologists find the evidence of a society in transition. Some jars cradle a single individual, while others hold the collected bones of multiple people, suggesting either family tombs or a secondary burial rite where remains were gathered and reburied after the flesh had decayed. This practice points to a new, more complex relationship with ancestry and land, a need to permanently connect lineages to the fields they now cultivated. The grave goods tell a parallel story of changing values. Bronze mirrors, polished to a brilliant sheen, reflect spiritual beliefs and a growing concern with personal appearance and status. Magatama, those comma-shaped beads carved from jade or glass, were more than mere jewelry. They were sacred objects that would eventually become part of Japan's imperial regalia, symbols of a spiritual authority that was beginning to coalesce. Alongside these spiritual items lay bronze daggers and spearheads, objects of war and prestige that were utterly new to the islands. the presence of these goods was not uniform. Some jars held rich collections while others were nearly empty. This variation is a clear archaeological signature of emerging social stratification, the first visible cracks in an egalitarian shell. For the first time, the wealth generated by a surplus of rice, a resource that could be stored, taxed, and fought over, was creating a permanent class divide. How do these humble jars illustrate such a vast cultural shift? They are physical containers of a dual process, the adoption of foreign ideas and their deliberate reshaping to fit a local world. The Yayoi did not just receive a new technology, they absorbed it, adapted it, and used it to build the very foundations of Japanese society, a society where the sacred, the social, and the agricultural became inextricably woven together in the clay that held their dead. A single tooth enshrined in gold holds more power than the tomb of any emperor. In the heart of Kandy, Sri Lanka, the Temple of the Tooth shelters what devout Buddhists believe is the left canine of Siddhartha Gautama himself, the Buddha. This is not a burial of a body, but the enshrinement of a fragment, a sacred relic that has drawn pilgrims and sparked wars for over 16 centuries. Since its arrival on the island in the 4th century CE, this relic has been the ultimate prize, a symbol of divine right that entire kingdoms were built upon. To possess the tooth was to hold the mandate to rule, legitimizing the authority of Sri Lankan monarchs for generations. The temple that houses it is a masterpiece of Kandyan architecture, a symphony of carved wood, vibrant painted ceilings, and shimmering gold, every detail designed to honor the profound sanctity within. The relic itself rests inside a series of nested golden caskets, like a spiritual core within layers of devotion, placed in a chamber behind an ornate iron grill. The daily rituals are a sensory feast with the sound of drums and horns, the scent of frangipani and incense, and the sight of offerings of light and flowers, all creating a living, breathing connection to the divine. This tooth has endured a dramatic history of being stolen by foreign invaders, hidden by loyal monks, and triumphantly recovered, its survival seen as a testament to the resilience of the faith itself. So what does the veneration of this single fragment reveal? In a tradition that teaches the impermanence of all physical forms, the reverence for a bodily relic might seem paradoxical. But the tooth is not worshipped as a piece of a person. It is venerated as a direct connection to the Buddha's teachings, his Dharma. It is a touchstone, a physical anchor for a spiritual presence that is otherwise formless and boundless. The entire temple complex is a monument to this idea, demonstrating that in Buddhism, a relic is not a container for a soul, but a focal point for contemplation, a bridge between the mundane world and the state of enlightenment. How does an object so small command such profound devotion? It proves that the most powerful memorials are not always vast pyramids or golden masks, but can be the smallest, most intimate remains, charged with the weight of an entire worldview. Beneath the Grand Arch of Triumph in Paris, a different kind of tomb holds the weight of a modern world. The tomb of the unknown soldier does not celebrate a single emperor or king, but honors a life stripped of every identity, a soldier who could be anyone and therefore represents everyone. This 20th century burial concept was born from the unimaginable carnage of the First World War, a conflict of industrial scale that produced millions of casualties, countless of whom were rendered anonymous by the very machinery of war. For the first time, nations could not bring their sons home, and communities were left with graves to visit that held no name. In response, France interred a single, unidentifiable soldier beneath the Arc de Triomphe in 1920, a symbolic act that transformed countless individual tragedies into a single, powerful focus for national grief. This unknown warrior stands in for every lost comrade, a silent everyman whose sacrifice becomes the property of the entire nation. The eternal flame, first lit here, adds a new dimension to the language of burial, a perpetual fire that refuses to let memory grow cold. This flame is not a provision for an afterlife journey, but a promise from the living to the dead, a vow that their sacrifice will be remembered forever. This ritual has since been adopted across the globe, from Washington to London, from Ottawa to New Delhi, with each nation adapting the ceremony to reflect its own cultural fabric. Some place a rifle and helmet upon the tomb, others a wreath of native flowers, but the core message remains the same, a collective embrace of the anonymous fallen. How does this modern practice reflect our changing relationship with death? In an age defined by industry and nationalism, the ultimate sacrifice was no longer for a chieftain or a god-king, but for the abstract idea of the nation-state. The tomb is a monument to this new kind of faith, where the individual is willingly subsumed into the collective. It represents a profound shift, turning the deeply personal act of mourning into a public, civic duty, and transforming a field of unknown graves into a single, sacred site where an entire country can project its memory, its gratitude, and its loss. Each grave we have explored is a single sentence in a much larger story. To truly read them, we must understand why these sites are such perfect time capsules. How a society treats its dead holds up a mirror to its most fundamental beliefs, from its spiritual fears and hopes to the rigid structures of its social classes. A royal tomb overflowing with gold speaks of a god-king whose power transcends death, while a communal mound like West Kennet Long Barrow reveals a culture that saw identity as a collective project, built stone by stone over generations. The Chinchorro Mummies, with their universal preservation, show a society where the right to an afterlife was a human birthright, not a privilege of status. These practices are not random, they are deeply encoded reflections of a worldview's core. The very location of a cemetery tells its own tale. Is it hidden away in a dark cave, integrated into the village Midden, or displayed prominently on a sacred mountaintop? Each choice reveals a different relationship between the living and the dead, a different answer to the question of where our ancestors belong. The shift from the Talheim Death Pit to the Paris Catacombs shows a dramatic evolution in managing the practical problem of death itself, from the crisis of a single massacre to the public health solution for an entire metropolis, all while grappling with the same human need for dignity and order. Our ability to decipher these messages has been revolutionized by science. The early treasure hunters who opened the tomb of the Lord of Sipán saw the glitter of gold, but modern archaeologists, with their ground-penetrating radar and DNA sequencers, can read the entire biography of a civilization. They can trace the childhood malnutrition etched into the enamel of a tooth, identify the geographic origins of a person from the isotopes in their bones, and even reconstruct the genetic lineage that connects a 13,000-year-old child in Montana to living populations today. This scientific precision has been matched by a profound ethical evolution. We are increasingly recognizing that these are not merely sites for data extraction, they are sacred spaces. The collaboration with descendant communities, from Native American tribes to modern Egyptians, has transformed archaeology from a colonial act of collection into a shared conversation, one that respects the continuous thread of memory and tradition. When we look across this vast tapestry of burial practices, from the skulls on stakes in a Scandinavian lake to the Terracotta Army standing in eternal vigilance, we see both stunning diversity and powerful universals. Every culture, in its own way, has asked the same questions. What happens to us when we die? How do we honor those we have lost? And how does their memory shape the world we build for the living? The answers are as varied as humanity itself, but the questions bind us across millennia. These 25 sites are not just a list of mysterious graves. They are a collective exploration of the human condition, proving that our greatest monuments have always been built not just for the living, but as a bridge to whatever lies beyond. Our journey through these 25 mysterious burial sites reveals a profound truth about humanity, our endless creativity in the face of mortality. From the frozen tombs of the Scythians to the sun-baked pyramids of Kush, every culture developed a unique language for honoring the dead, a language shaped by their environment, their beliefs, and the structure of their society. The Sumerians sent their queens with a full court, the Jomon kept their ancestors in the kitchen Midden, and the Chinchorro lovingly rebuilt every single person. These practices are not random, they are deeply encoded reflections of a worldview's core. Together, they challenge the simple stories we tell about the past, revealing unexpected connections across vast distances and reminding us that human history is a tapestry woven from both stunning diversity and shared fundamental concerns. The meticulous care evident in every grave, from the golden mask of Pakal the Great to the simple toolkit in a Windover pond, speaks to universal qualities that transcend time. Love, respect, and a deep, abiding desire for meaning are the common threads that bind us to our ancestors. As science advances, these silent tombs will continue to speak. Each new discovery, whether read from a fragment of DNA or seen in the glow of ground-penetrating radar, adds another crucial piece to the grand, unfinished puzzle of our shared story. We would love to hear which of these sites most captured your imagination, so please share your thoughts in the comments below. For more journeys into history's greatest mysteries, be sure to subscribe.